Hey everybody, thanks for joining in on this session. I know a lot of you folks just came out of Bria's session, so I'm excited to have you all. The name of this session is Stories from the Field, Perspectives on Strategic Communication. So the purpose of this session is to learn about the strategies community justice practitioners have used to disseminate information about their projects to promote community and funding support for their initiative, including social media, data visualization, and navigating different political landscapes. We're so excited to have three really amazing panelists. I'm so excited for you to hear everything that they have to share about storytelling. We have Judge Christopher Hazlett-Stevens from Department 4 of the Reno Municipal Court. We also have Magistrate Jorge Abraham Ramírez Alvidrez from the Superior Court Justice of Chihuahua. And we have Licenciada María Isabel Sánchez Quirarte, member and former coordinator of the Citizens Council on Security and Justice in Ciudad, Juárez. Yeah, we'll start off and I'll let Judge Christopher Hazlett-Stevens take it away and share a little bit more about himself and his work and his story.
All right, thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for joining this afternoon. It's morning here in Reno, Nevada. I'm going to start with a personal framework about kind of where I am, who I am, where I came from, and then how that made its way into what I do now, presiding over community court, which is what we're going to talk about. I'll start by saying this: being a judge, sitting here as a judge in front of you was not in my field of vision. Not in a million years did I think that this is something that I would be doing. I grew up in East LA, Los Angeles. I'll tell you that I wasn't a profoundly gifted student in East LA. And I actually started my career as a classically trained musician, professional musician in Los Angeles. And I did that for many, many years. You know, and it was a great career. I enjoyed that career for a number of years, but something was missing from that career. And what was missing for me was a public service. There was a constant and pressing desire in me to help others in the form of giving my career to public service. And that's what I decided to do. So I changed everything over. I actually got a degree in administration of justice. I minored in Spanish as well so that I could provide my service to a greater number of people, including the Spanish-speaking populations that I would eventually work with. And I targeted my career, I focused my career from that point forward in providing service to whatever community I was living in, whether that was as a bilingual service coordinator for a child abuse treatment agency in Long Beach, California, as a state bar investigator investigating attorney misconduct in California, and then serving for 12 years as a criminal prosecutor here in the city of Reno. Now, I was eventually appointed to the bench in 2021. And one thing I do as a judge is I preside over community court. Community court is an alternative to the traditional criminal justice system, predominantly for Reno's unsheltered population, those experiencing homelessness. And it's important that we have this alternative court. I'll tell you what, as a criminal prosecutor, now as a judge, we understood that the criminal justice system was not built for what we were doing with this population. Is people who were experiencing homelessness were committing very low-level misdemeanor quality of life type crimes. And yet the policy of the police and the courts and the prosecutor's office was to treat them in the traditional criminal justice system. So police would often arrest these individuals for these crimes because they were repeating and repeating and repeating these crimes over many years, actually. These were chronically homeless we were dealing with in Reno. And they would arrest them, take them to jail. A judge would eventually see them within maybe a few days. And the judge would either impose a sentence of maybe credit for time served, or maybe the prosecutor would be asking for a few days in jail, 5 days in jail, 10 days in jail, whatever it is. Of course, that person, after serving whatever sentence that is in jail, would be released back into the exact same situation he or she was taken from. Nothing will have changed for that person. the court will have done nothing to reduce recidivism, to change that person's life. And inevitably, that person would reoffend and be back in the court system yet again. And it was this constant cycling through. And judges and prosecutors, me included, defense attorneys would be in consternation about what exactly the answer was. What do we do with this population that makes a difference, that's something different than the traditional criminal justice system model? And it's not that the criminal justice system is broken, and I'm not saying that, I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm saying that the criminal justice tools that we had to work with are not the tools that we needed to deal with this humanitarian issue. It was like trying to screw in a screw with a hammer. It just wasn't the right tool. You know, judges have the tools of jail, community service, fines, probation, but those aren't the tools that are going to help this population thrive and therefore stop committing these crimes and reduce recidivism. Now, came along community court. Community court is an entirely different model. And I'll tell you this before I get into community court model. At the same time that the courts were finding difficulty in dealing with this population because we didn't have the answers and our criminal justice system was not the answer, at the same time, providers in our community were having their own difficulties with this population. It was difficult to have people follow through with the services that were being provided by these providers. And they were having a difficult time as well because the person would maybe come to 1 or 2 sessions of mental health treatment or substance abuse treatment, but then would fall off and never return to that treatment. So there was a substantial lack of follow through. So these two dynamics were going on at the same time and not interacting at all. Community court is an entirely different model. We obviously, it's still a part of the criminal justice system, but we take an alternative approach. What we do in the community court is we don't even meet at the courthouse. We meet in the downtown library here in Reno so that it's a different setting from the courthouse. Instead of police arresting this population for these low-level crimes, they will actually cite them into the Reno Municipal Community Court, into the downtown library. And there at the library, they'll be greeted with a cup of hot coffee, snacks, they'll be given lunch. And we will do an assessment to determine what their risks and needs are. And then we will take them to the one of many, many providers we have on site at community court every single Wednesday. At last count, we had 25 providers that were able, willing, and ready to provide services for this population as they come to court. What we found is this. It's the immediate access to services that makes a difference for this population. Instead of making an appointment, setting an appointment, and having that person go to that appointment somewhere in the city of Reno, the providers were there at court helping and assisting them right there in the moment. And that was the game changer. The other reason this is working is it's a systems approach. So the providers are there providing services, and the court is there as the enforcement arm, enforcing the follow through of those services. That's what's working. We also have case managers that handhold these people, these individuals through the system so that they could get their needs met in a more profound and robust way, so that it actually creates a difference. This is what reduces recidivism, because we're assisting these individuals thrive by giving them housing opportunities, employment opportunities, access to substance use counseling, access to mental health counseling, and access to the basics that we all take for granted: identification, social security cards, birth certificates. These are all the hurdles that stand in someone's way to get access to employment, housing opportunities. We also have people at our court that will assist them in clearing their criminal history, so that that is not a barrier to housing or employment. This is what we do at community court. It's a completely different model, and I'm excited to talk about community court more in this session. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of an overview about what community court here is in Reno, how it looks here in Reno, and what we're doing here in Reno. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to see everyone.
Thank you so much, Judge Hazlett-Stevens. I think even within your introduction, you did such an exemplary job of embodying some of the things that they've taught in the VSPA model, of talking about the value at stake, what the problem is, what some solutions could be and how folks can take action. So thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you.
I'd love to turn it over to Isabel and Magistrate Ramírez to talk about your work.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for the introduction. And I'm going to give you a different approach that we've taken in Ciudad Juárez. Let me just get this done. Just a minute. I'm an attorney, so please don't don't take that against me. Here we go. I'm sharing the screen. Okay. Well, my name is Isabel Sánchez, and I'm a corporate attorney in Ciudad Juárez. And you'll be asking, why is a corporate attorney in Juárez talking about community court to this audience? And I'm a stakeholder. I'm a community stakeholder. What you're looking for when you're setting up a community court. I'm one of the people that advocates for community courts in my city. And I will tell you my story. How did I come to do this? Because it's not a natural thing for a corporate attorney to be involved in community court. So we have community justice in Ciudad Juárez. I don't know if you know where Ciudad Juárez is. We're right at the border with El Paso, Texas. We were named one of the, in fact, the most violent city in the world for a couple of years. And I'll tell you why. Let me see. Can you see? Peter, can you help? I'm trying to do the clicker. Put it forward. Okay. There we go. We were basically a very calm city before 2008. And in 2008 and 2010, violence exploded in Ciudad Juárez. Just so that you know, we had 3,084 homicides in 2010. We have a population of about 1.5 million people. So this was about a little bit less than 300 homicides a month. And for a city that size, it's an enormous amount of homicides. In 2010, we had the Villas de Salvarca tragedy, where 15 kids lost their lives. They were a softball team. And the president unfortunately said, Presidente Calderón, that they were criminals. And when they turned out to be kids on a softball team, he had to come here to calm the waters. We were very upset. And he came here and there were uncoordinated authorities. The federal, state, and local authorities did not even know each other. So they would blame each other for what was happening. This created the perfect storm. We had corruption, impunity, social disparities, a gap, and unemployment. And the Citizens Council for Security and Justice in Ciudad Juárez was born. Why did I go into this? Because kidnapping is starting to get up in Juárez. And they went and tried to kidnap my husband, who owns a restaurant. So that's why I got involved. It's not something that is easy to confront, but when violence comes to your door, you have to do something about it. Either you flee your city or you stay and fight. And we decided to stay and fight. And we started protesting in the streets. But we found out that protesting did nothing. So we went from protest and confrontation to proposals and collaboration. The Citizens Council is a very strange entity. We are not formally formed. We do not have an NGO. We're all volunteers. We're from different parts of life, universities, human rights defenders, businessmen, every part of Ciudad Juárez is represented in this council. What do? We work with the authorities. We are co-responsible for our security in Juárez. So what do? We establish direct communication with them. We sit at the same table. We discuss matters and issues with them at the same level. We're all citizens there. There's no authority. There's no seniority there. we're all the same. So we discussed security matters, and we came to the conclusion that it doesn't matter who's responsible for what. We all live in the same city, and we have to resolve this problem. So everybody got together. We discuss and promote proposals, and we generate programs, but we have no fundings. And we do promote a culture of lawfulness. We promote confidence between the community and the authorities. As you can imagine, in the beginning, we did not trust them, and they did not trust us. It was a matter of getting one person that you trust and working with them, and then getting another person that we trust. This was difficult because at the beginning, they sent people to help us, and those people were unfortunately murdered. So it was a very difficult process. This has taken a lot of years. We promote confidence between the community and the authorities based on facts. We have a saying, if we don't measure something, we cannot improve it. So we started measuring crimes. We started measuring the effectiveness of the authorities, and that helped them to say, well, we're doing something. We guarantee the permanence of security projects that we promote when authorities change from one party to the other, and when there have been different parties in charge of federal, state, and municipal administration. And just so that you know, all levels of government are sitting with us: the federal government, the state government, and the local government, all law enforcement, court systems. And we have one thing that we have to our advantage. One of the actors that sits with us is the U.S. consulate that is here in Ciudad Juárez. We work through committees, and we're all volunteers. And one of our committees is the Drug and Treatment Committee. This committee came about because we found out that 80 to 90% of our homicides were related to drug crimes in Juárez. So we came up with the drug committee when everybody was sitting down. And fortunately for us, we had a very curious magistrate, Marco Tulio Cano, and a very curious person from the consulate, Patricia Morales. And they decided that, how do we do things different? There were 14,000 files that were pending in court. And if you send someone to jail for a drug offense, you put someone with just a small minor offense, and they come out with a rifle, we say, or an AR-15, because there's no going back from that part. So what did they decide? They decided, we went to see what our statistics were. In Juárez, 60,000 people have tried drugs, 39 individuals, 9,000 individuals consume drugs several times a week, and approximately 14,000 consume every day. And there were no services. And I know that the judge was talking about this. There were no services to provide to these people. So when the people from Juárez went to New York and to Georgia to look at problem-solving courts to see how we could do things differently, then they come up with a plan. And we don't have money, but there is a trust in Juárez that is called the Trust for Security and Competitiveness in the state of Chihuahua. That is an initiative by business owners to be a financial instrument to promote the projects that we had at the Mesa de Seguridad. So this was, I was a part of that board for 10 years. And we, businessmen, that's why we're stakeholders. We auto-imposed a tax on ourselves. We said, put 4% of, on top of the 4% that we're paying for payroll tax, put a 5% tax on that, and we'll do a trust, and we as the businessmen will distribute the money for security projects. And that's where the money came from to do the visits to New York, to Georgia, for the startup of the community court that we have in Juárez, that is the community drug court that is now in play, and that's headed now by Jorge, that we'll talk next. So what do? We work in conjunction. The NGO with the Citizens Council and the trust work together. The Citizens Council gets a project. We sit down with the authorities, and the trust gets businessmen together, and they approve the projects that we're doing. And that way we fortify our 3 levels of government. And I'm sorry, my time is up, but that's how we started, that's how we promote, and that's how we advocate for our community court, and that's why we're involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you for providing us all the background and context for this initiative in Juárez and for demonstrating your storytelling skills in the process. Magistrate Ramírez, I'd love to turn the focus to you for a few minutes. As a member of the judiciary in Juárez, could you share your perspective on this initiative from that side of the official court system?
Yes, thanks for the opportunity to be here with you. Especially thanks to Natalia Reyes, and of course, thank you, Peter. Well, we have a written system since the Spanish conquered us, but the papers and the way we did justice made us too slow. So we adopt an oral system. Now we can say or tell story in front of the judge. He listen and see not only the words, but he see the body language. An oral system gives us the chance to give better justice in Chihuahua. We apply before life imprisonment, several penalties for various crimes like kidnapping, extortion, homicides, human trafficking, but we feel the prisons. And the crime is still dangerous. We have to realize that it's not the only punished crimes, but must integrate them to the community. Criminals don't come from another planet. They live and grew up with us. So let's change the focus and start to be responsible for the crime and criminals. Let's start being more efficient, more human, more supportive, and more empathic. If the people can share their story to the judge, we will have the better options to make legal decisions. It's critical for a court and legal professionals to see yourself as a part of the same community and those who constitute the justice systems. We're accountable to each other here in Juárez in order to keep people in communities healthy, like Tarahumaras and Tepehuanes, our native peoples do.
Thank you so much, Magistrate Ramírez, for sharing more about that. I wanted to ask you one more question specific to you and your perspective. I know that you speak about the culture of indigenous tribes in Northern Mexico in your work. Could you tell us more about them and why it's important for us to know about it? Why is it important for you as a representative from the court system to make sure people know their stories?
And for community courts, Tarahumaras, their traditions keeps all community members close and accountable for each other. Instead for looking to punish someone for behaviors, this culture have traditional look for the entire community to understand what condition led to that behaviors in the first place. By communicating these messages, we have encouraged the business community in Juárez to see that they can be part of the solution of the crime in the city. That is the vision of justice that the president of this court, Miriam Hernandez, has as justice that we are all jointly responsible. It is important for the business community to ask themselves how have they contribute to creating equal conditions and how or what the people can do for engaging crime. So how can we be part of this fixing that?
Thank you so much, Magistrate Ramírez. At this point, I'd love to open up this conversation to the rest of our panelists. And I'm so excited to hear all your perspectives and experiences and insights on this topic of storytelling. So to flip the script back onto you all, I'd love to ask you, what is a story that has stuck with you and why?
Well, I think all the time in workers and students and responsible people who use substance or drugs out of fears, curiosity, illness, and who made them open prison, but we don't fully attend them. And how the business community convince us to have the border, to have a different vision of justice. We have to campaign and implement it with them. Maybe Judge Hazlett has something.
Thank you. You know, I reflect on this, and the one thing that continues to come up is I think about stakeholders, and I think about who my stakeholders are. And with these different panelists we have here this morning or this afternoon, I'm learning about new stakeholders that I think I need to reach out to bring into the fold of community court, because there are more stakeholders that I think I'm missing, frankly, because I'm looking at the kind of the go-to stakeholders that Reno has. And every community has different types of stakeholders based on their community. But what's interesting here is this, and this is the story that I'll tell and I'll reflect on that sticks with me. When we opened community court up in 2019, one of the most, I think, resistant stakeholders were the police. Because look, you tell a police officer, we're not going to arrest anyone anymore. We're not going to do that. We're not going to cite him into the courthouse anymore. Instead, we're going to cite this individual into the downtown library. You can imagine the resistance. You can imagine the feelings of, wait a minute, that's not what we're trained to do. That's not what we're able to do. And the resistance was natural. It made sense to me that that was the resistance from these stakeholders. And what's interesting, COVID shut community court down from 2020 through into 2021 for over a year. The stakeholder that wanted community court up the most, who was engaged and who really wanted community court to reopen and was asking when community court would reopen, were the police. They know that it's a system that works. They know that the traditional criminal justice system does not work for this population. They were part of the cycling through, and they didn't want to be a part of that anymore. I've spoken to many police officers who will say the same thing and who have said the same thing to me. They don't want to be a part of that system because they know it doesn't work. And so this was the community. These were the stakeholders that were actually wanting and pressing us to reopen community court, because they know this model is a much better model than the traditional model. So that was what was interesting to me about the stakeholders we have. That was the story that kind of sticks with me.
I have a couple of them, but I'll tell you one. One of the most interesting ones is when a magistrate called me and said that the public defender's office and the DA had a 14-year-old girl that had gone through the system that needed rehab, and that there was no rehab available, and that the mother had helped turn her in because she was afraid they were going to kill her. So we got some businessmen together, and we found the public defender's office found a rehab center, and we just got people together and we funded it. It was an immediate thing. This would not have happened a couple of years ago because our mentality changed. Instead of looking at people that use drugs as criminals, we started to look at them as individuals that have a problem. And so we're there to help. And that mentality changed. And it is not a small thing to have people in the community change their mindset of wanting to punish someone to wanting to help someone. And I think that that is part of what our storytelling has to be. You know, how do we humanize these events so that we are willing to help, so that we are willing to provide, you know, services to people that are in need.
Thank you all for sharing some of those stories. They're definitely ones that I'm going to think about after this panel. Something that came up in that question was talking about different stakeholders. So Judge Hazlett-Stevens, you mentioned talking to police officers. I know that in your work, you speak to casinos, to people on opposite ends of the political spectrum. Isabel, I know you speak in front of very tough oppositional press conferences. And Magistrate Ramírez, I know that something Isabel has told us about you is that you use storytelling techniques that involve people when you're speaking. So my question for you all is, can you tell me about a time that you've had to change your story for a different audience or medium?
Sure, I'm happy to start. Yeah, my story does change depending on who I'm talking to, because I need to press different points. I need to have different conversations about the same shared values. We have a shared value of people thriving. That's a shared value. A shared value of reducing recidivism. Everyone wants that. That's a shared value we all have. But I have to speak to that shared value in different ways to different groups that I'm speaking with. In fact, about 5 months ago, I was invited to speak to the directors of security of our casinos in our community. We have a lot of casinos here in our community, and what we have is they have been dealing with crimes, and they're low-level crimes, but they deal with them as part of their business model, and it's trespassing, people coming into their casinos and being there when they shouldn't be, some causing issues. And this has been going on for years. And they want it to stop, and they want a solution. And I think there was a little bit of a hesitancy when community court model came up. And they said, I'm not so sure about that. They want these individuals maybe taken through the traditional criminal justice system, arrested, and maybe some jail or probation. But I talk to them, I speak to them, and I ask them this question: has what we've been doing for the past 10, 20, 30 years, has it worked? Has it changed anything for your casino operation, our traditional model? And the answer is uniformly no, it hasn't done any good at all. So I give them and I offer them a different model that has worked and does work. And I tell them what the model is so they understand the model and they understand exactly what we're dealing with. Because when stakeholders don't have enough information about the community court model, they start assuming things and they start presuming things, and those aren't necessarily accurate. And so I need to clarify exactly what we're doing. And once I clarify exactly what we're doing, they're happy. They're excited about what we're doing. All of the security directors that I spoke with were really engaged in the conversation. They were really excited about what we're doing, and they're all in. There's been no comments since about what we're doing and well, it's not working and let's go back to the traditional model. That's not the case. And so that conversation was different than another group maybe that I would have a conversation with, but that was my conversation, the way I had to frame it with that particular group.
Well, when I was the head of the Citizens Council, I was the head of for 2 years. I had to do monthly press, and in the press conferences, you have people that are very tough and that are very difficult. So how we approach them is different. You have to approach them with facts. And we spoke with facts, and that's how they respect us, because we don't sugarcoat it. If we have 180 homicides that month, we have 180 homicides that month. If we have 70 homicides that month, then we have 70 homicides that month. We don't sugarcoat it. So you win their respect by doing factual, giving them facts. And how we convince them about community court and other projects is by bringing the authority that's involved with that project with us to the press conferences, so that they see that the community is working with the authority on this project and that they have our backing. So they're not worried about corruption, and they're not worried about a lot of the other things that would come with it, because they have us with them, bringing them, being their support. So it is difficult to change minds, and you have to tell different audiences, like Judge said, different things about the same thing. They're facts, they're the same facts, but you have to give different facts to different people. The press always wants hard facts, we had to, do a joint forces with the authorities to present one front, because that's the way that you had to do it. And if you're speaking to businessmen and if you're speaking to other people, you do a completely different tactic.
And to this court, the Chihuahua court, we have a different vision about the people, what we have in front of us. If you involve with the people for the solution of the problem, it's better for the community. For us, being socially responsible as a community has been the path of the justice of our ancestors. Punishing those who commit crimes do not lower crime indexes. It has been proved for 100 of years. Being responsible for who commits those crimes has built strong communities and has been proved for 1,000 of years in our ocean contours, just because they don't have a close vision of a community. I think that's the work what we have to do for the people and for our community.
I think what I've heard from all of you is the value of talking about vision, history, shared values, hard facts in storytelling. How are you able to balance both the breadth and the depth in how you tell your stories? I know, Isabel, that you've talked about bringing everyone to the same table and taking it from the top down and bringing it up from the bottom. And I know, Judge Hazlett, you use a lot of your experience as a prosecutor to speak to certain crowds, and that real experience lends a lot of validity to what you have to say to people. So I'm curious about how you're able to balance both the big picture and the details in how you tell your stories.
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. I love the idea of vision that Magistrate Ramírez just spoke about. I'm going to go off topic a little bit, but I think that vision is really important, and I think that's a really important part of storytelling. I think that's a really important part of what we are all doing, and I think we have to have two separate visions. I think we have to have a vision of what we're after, kind of what our goal is and how that looks, so that we can work to create that vision. If we don't have a vision, then we're just kind of piecemealing this together and we don't know where it's going to go or where it's going to end up. And while there's value in that because we're doing something constructive, I think that the vision has to kind of let us know where we're potentially headed. And I think there's an overall vision that I think we have to look at, create for ourselves as well, so that we know what we're after. And then I think we have to have a vision for the people in front of us as judges. I'll tell you what, I have a vision for each individual that comes before me in community court. They don't have that vision for themselves. I know they don't have that vision for themselves at this point in their lives, but they've had that vision in the past. And I try to reflect on that vision that they've had for themselves, where they want to be in their lives, how they want that to look. And so I have a conversation about visions and about how they would like their life to be and about how they envision themselves in the future, so that we can get them there as well. So we can get them as part of their vision, and then within the broader vision that we have as well. I speak to them, by the way, and I'm going to depart from being a prosecutor. I speak to this population in a much different way. I've had 29 different jobs in my life. 29 different jobs. I've counted them. My boys wanted me to count them one day, so I counted them up, 29. And I've done everything. Obviously, I've been a professional musician, but that was the start of my career. I've been a janitor. I've been a dishwasher. I've been a bartender, a waiter, a busboy, a mechanic. You name it, I've done it. And that's really important, especially for this population, because they look at me as unapproachable, unreachable. And yet when I explain what I've done and how I've lived my vision, ultimately, it sits with them in a much different way. When they come to me sheepishly and say, I got a job, Judge, and I'm really excited for them. Great, you got a job. What is it? What are you going to do? And they sheepishly tell me, oh, well, I'm just a janitor. I'm like, wait a minute. It's a job that pays you money, and you're doing something of value. And by the way, I was a janitor. I was a janitor for many years, putting myself through college. And it's an offer. It offers humility. I'll tell you that. Cleaning toilets for a living offers humility in one's life, but it's a paycheck and it's an honest day's work. There's value in that, and go do it and do your best at it. And those are the conversations I have with the defendants in front of me that have a much better reaction than an unapproachable, unreachable judge that's sitting high up on a bench that they don't know anything about.
And I'll go back a little bit. The Citizens Council is a very unique structure, and it's being replicated throughout Mexico because it was the first time where the three levels of government sat down with citizens on the same level. And we have a vision that what we want is peace. What we want and what everybody wants is peace, and that we are all citizens. Some have, jobs in the government, and others, we're just the community. But at the end of the day, we're all citizens and we all have to live here. So we want a peaceful place to live. And that is our main vision as a Citizens Council and as a trust. We want a safe place to live. But that has been extending, because it used to be we want a safe place for us to live. And now we want a safe place for everybody to live. So how do we look at people that are committing certain offenses? We have to look at them as citizens too. So we're extending our vision to everybody. And that is something that, as Judge says, when you tell them we're on the same playing level, we want the same things. I want prosperity for you, because that means prosperity for the city and prosperity for everyone. That changes the dynamic. And when you sit down with the authorities for more than 10 years that we have, you build a trust. And we can say a lot of things between us, and we can disagree on a lot of things, but our vision is the same. And that, I think, is the most important thing, that we can get to consensus, because we know that even if we disagree, we still have to live here and we still have to make things better. And the other thing is, we are apolitical. We do not admit any politics in our council, which is very difficult to do. But we say politics, stay at the door. It does not matter what party you belong to, if you don't belong to, what religion you are, it does not matter. Here we are the same. Here we can discuss. Here is a safe place. So I think that is why we've been able to get our vision across, and why people trust us, because they know that we have no agenda. Our only agenda is peace.
And how Judge Hara says, we like the vision. We really like the vision, but I'm in love with the actions, what we do. We have more than 10,000 people in our court system. 7,000 was for drug problems or for drug courts. And then we have 3,000 already resolved their problems with the law and with their health. So because we are responsible with them, and because the business people from Juárez help us to give them another chance, job, a place to be, and a place to research their works.
It's so interesting. I knew what questions I'd be asking you all, but when you shared those stories, I found myself getting really emotional just hearing it and wanting to contribute to all the work you're doing. How do you do that? How do you tell stories in a way that bring people in to take action? I found myself wanting to do that listening to you all. So I know, Isabel, you talk about how it's important to tell the stories of the beneficiaries on the project, and how you said that these stories pulled at board members' heartstrings. So they said, how could they not fund something like this? And Judge Hazlett-Stevens, I know that you develop a lot of partnerships within the community, even with the Washoe County Library, where you have community court. So yeah, how do you tell stories in a way that bring people in to take action?
Go ahead, Judge.
All right,
Go
I'll start.
first.
I'm happy to start. I'm happy to start. We have to personalize it, because if we don't make it personal, if we don't provide a kind of a personal context to what we're doing, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of ways to connect with people, and I think making it connecting with the group of people you're discussing with a shared vision, I think is really important. But I think the only way that I've been able to connect with all of these groups, providers, the jail, police, the different courts in our system, because I have other courts in our system now that are transferring their cases over to community court because they know what they're doing. But every single person I've spoken with and every group that I've spoken to, I personalize it. I put my heart out there. I think it's clear that that's kind of who I am. I put my heart out there, and they understand that. They connect with that. And I think without groups or people connecting with what you're doing, you're not going to have buy-in. They're not going to say, they might acquiesce, but that's different than buy-in. And you want buy-in. You know, the library system, they say, yeah, we want you there. We love having you there every Wednesday morning. The population that you're dealing with is there anyway, and we love that you're there working with this population, supporting them, getting them on their feet and making them thrive. So that's buy-in versus simply acquiescence. Acquiescence, certainly, you know, it takes away a roadblock, but what I try to create with everybody I speak with, whether it's an individual just curious about community court, or whether it's about a group or an entity or a stakeholder, it's all about buy-in. And the only way I've been able to create buy-in is personalizing what I'm talking about with them.
Well, I totally agree with the judge. When I was in the board of trustees of the trust, it was my job to help the staff present the projects to the board members. And the board members are all businessmen, and they are very tough cookies. So what I would tell them is, don't be too technical. That's where I tell you, it's somewhere you have to be 100% with the facts. And in other places you have to pull heartstrings. So I'd say, you know, put a video up of one of the beneficiaries of the program, someone that has graduated, someone that now has a job, that because of one of our programs, they went out to community court. Now they're, you know, they have a job, they're productive, they're good citizens. So that's what we would do. And the board members would say, you know, you do this every time, you pull our heartstrings and we can't say no. So that's the way we got things funded with our board. We would have to humanize and personalize, like the judge says. What are you doing to make people's lives better? And see the result of that. That is very powerful. And I think that is one of the most powerful things, to tell your story, but to tell other stories in the same, you know, emotional manner that you do. So I think that brings in stakeholders, that brings in the business people to do funding for community court and for other projects that derive from community court, like a person that engages and finds programs for people that are coming out of community court.
Yes, we see them like people, like human. We don't see a number or someone who is in problem with the law. We saw someone who is in problem with his life, and we have to help him with work, with space, with a place, with peace. That's because we have that vision. the goal of this work is the peace. And I think we're doing better.
If I could say something, Isabel, thank you. You brought something up that I agree with wholeheartedly, is to identify a success story, and that's what works. That's what works across the board. Everyone loves a good success story. Everyone loves someone who's been struggling and who is now thriving. And if you can identify an individual or a group of individuals that have changed their lives in a fundamental and profound way because of what you're doing, you're absolutely right. And I'll tell you, I speak to so many different stakeholders, police and casinos. And it's interesting because we're in a very small community here in Reno, and especially downtown Reno. And when I speak to people that are somewhat resistant about what we're doing, I will actually name names because they know them. We know the people that we're dealing with, and because they've been chronically homeless for years, if not decades. And I say, when's the last time you saw so-and-so? When's the last time you had to interact with him and cite him? And then they reflect, because all they see is what's in front of them. All they see is, wait, there's still homeless on the street. And so you're not really making a difference. And so I have to reflect with them and take them back. And I say, when's the last time you saw this person? When's the last time you saw this person? And then they start thinking and they say, I haven't seen him for 6 months. And then I say, that's because of what we're doing. That's a success. And I'll tell you what, he's been sober for the past 6 months, even though he is drinking a gallon of vodka a day. Now so that's what it is. And I agree with you, Isabel, that the way to do this is personalize the individual stories, success stories, and that's what creates buy-in. I agree.
Thank you all for sharing that. I myself am a storyteller, so I'm learning so much from everyone on this panel. And I think something that I really took away is really that humanizing and personalizing and seeing it from that personal perspective for us to be able to connect with people. What are you all still working on and how you tell stories? Where do you see the future of storytelling in your work and in this field?
How some of the people who is looking at us says, how much it costs? I think it's cheaper trying to do different things than the things we did in the past, because they don't work. And I think it's going to be cheaper for us to be closer to the people and build a stronger communities. I think it's better for the court system to have people working on the streets and not in a prison. I think it's not a money issue. It's a different vision. And I think, how I said, we're doing better every day.
Mirroring what Jorge says, we have in the trust quantified how much it costs to have someone incarcerated and how much it costs to have someone working. So, because business people want to see costs too. So the cost benefit is amazing. Having someone in the court system is very expensive, even in Mexico. And having someone working, it multiplies the benefits, because then you have a working family, and then you have a prosperous family, then it multiplies the effects. So having someone incarcerated is actually costlier than having someone go through community court and solving their underlying issues, because they have underlying issues that have to be solved. Putting them in jail will not solve those issues. When they come out in 10 months' time, they will have those underlying issues, and then they will be part of a criminal organization. So then you have 2 problems or 3 problems or 4 problems that you have to deal with. So for us as the community and as business people, it makes more sense, even money-wise, to have people go through community court and go through the community drug court than it does to go through regular channels. So I know that's part of storytelling. You have to adapt to what you're being asked. if we're asking about money, then it is less costly to have people out than it is and provide them services than it is to have them and keep them incarcerated.
Thank you. I'll just be real quick because I know we're running up on time here. Our conversations are going to change. Politics are going to change, and politics, no matter that we don't want them in our court, we don't want to have to deal with it. We do have to deal with it, and politics might change. We have an election coming up here in the United States on Tuesday, and that's going to potentially change the conversation, change how community court looks, and change our stakeholders and change their impression of what we're doing. And so our conversation has to develop into reaching out to and bringing into the fold other community members that have not been brought into the fold at this point because they've been resistant, or because we haven't connected or met with that population. So that's going to have to continue, as well as bringing additional people in based on the political framework that's potentially going to happen in the Reno area. And we don't know what's going to happen necessarily, but we always have to think of it, because then there are going to be different entities, different groups saying you're doing this, and others saying you're not doing enough. You're doing too much, you're not doing enough. And we have to always kind of work within that balance. And I think that's going to be how our conversation develops in the very near future.
Thank you all for sharing your visions, like we've been talking about this whole time. Before I transition to our last question and close out, I just want to thank you all. This has been so incredibly helpful. I'm looking at the chat now. One person said, thank you for the session, very good information. Another person had said, this is such a shift from just presenting on how much money and resources are being saved to bringing in the humanity and the lives that are being changed, and how that's transformation for both individuals and systems. So I wanted you all to hear this live coming out of my mouth, because it's just more of an affirmation of why the work that you're doing and how you're telling stories is so powerful. But yes, to close out, what is one piece of advice that you would give to everyone listening to this panel right now?
Go ahead,
Well,
Judge.
Jorge?
Well, I think I could say that we have 100 years filling prisons, and it doesn't work. And Tarahumaras here in Chihuahua has 1,000 years making it strong, their communities, and it works. I think we have to be responsible for all of us. And then we want to have a better and a strong community. I think it's remarkable.
If I may, I think bring passion to when you tell your story. Bring your humanity, bring your experiences to when you're storytelling, because that makes it more real. I think that you connect better if you are talking from the heart, and that for me has always worked. If you speak from your heart and you speak about your values and what you want to accomplish, but not only in money, the sense of money, but as a human being, then that connects with people and that makes your story come alive. I think that is, for me, that's always worked.
Boy, that's true. I'll tell you what, it's funny. We call it community court for a reason, because it takes a community and it takes so many stakeholders and members of the community. But the only way to reach those stakeholders and those members of the community is to create the buy-in that we're all talking about. And the only way, just like Isabel just said, the only way to create that buy-in is to personalize what you're giving them, what you're selling them. Even if it's that the traditional system doesn't work, you have to create that buy-in. You have to personalize that buy-in. And I can personalize that as a prosecutor. I was in that system for 12 years, knowing it didn't work, but yet being a part of the system. That's a personal story that I can give people. it's all about personalizing it, whether it's about showing an individual or a sample of what we're doing, but it's also about sharing a vision that you have. And if you can kind of create that vision in people's minds of what you're trying to do, I think that's what also creates the buy-in. But it takes a community, and you've got to build those relationships within that community.
All right. Thank you all so much for being part of this panel. I know I got a lot of it out of it. I know our audience got a lot out of it. So I really appreciate you all taking the time today to share your stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you,
You all.
Peter. Thank you.